The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of prestigious Academy's library, each drop creating rivulets that distorted the view of the manicured grounds. Isabella Whitmore sat alone at a marble table, surrounded by scattered textbooks and crumpled paper, her usually perfect appearance disheveled from hours of futile studying. At 17, she was the daughter of tech mogul Richard Whitmore, whose net worth exceeded most countries' GDP. But tonight she felt like the poorest person in the world. Mathematics had always been her nemesis, an insurmountable wall that no amount of expensive tutoring seemed able to reach. Tomorrow's calculus exam loomed like a death sentence, threatening not just her grade point average, but her entire future. Her father had made it clear, failure was not an option for a Whitmore. The family reputation, built on excellence and achievement, could not tolerate academic mediocrity. As tears of frustration began to blur her vision, Isabella barely noticed the soft footsteps approaching her table. Frank Martinez had worked as a janitor at prestigious Academy for 37 years, cleaning up after generations of wealthy students who rarely acknowledged his existence. He was 62 now, officially retired but still coming in occasionally to help with special events. Tonight, he had stayed late to repair a broken light fixture in the library. Frank observed the young woman's distress with the wisdom of someone who had seen countless students struggle over the decades. Unlike the typical prestigious Academy student, Isabella's tears seemed genuine, born of real frustration rather than entitled dramatics. Something about her defeated posture reminded him of his own daughter, Maria, who had struggled with similar challenges. "Excuse me, miss," Frank said softly, his voice carrying the slight accent of his Puerto Rican heritage. "I couldn't help but notice you're having trouble with mathematics." Isabella looked up, surprised to see the elderly janitor she had passed countless times in the hallways, but never really noticed. His kind brown eyes held an intelligence that seemed at odds with his humble position, and his gentle demeanor immediately put her at ease. "I'll never pass this exam," she whispered, her voice breaking with desperation. "I've tried everything, but nothing makes sense." Frank glanced at the scattered papers, recognizing the complex calculus problems that had stumped so many students over the years. A small smile played at the corners of his mouth as he remembered his own hidden past, the degrees and achievements he had never mentioned to anyone at the Academy. "Watch me teach you," he said simply. Chapter 2. The Hidden Genius. Frank pulled up a chair beside Isabella, his weathered hands gently organizing the chaos of papers on the table. As he examined her work, she noticed something unexpected in his approach. He didn't just look at the problems, he seemed to understand them intuitively, seeing patterns and connections that had eluded her expensive tutors. "The first mistake everyone makes with calculus," Frank began, his voice taking on the cadence of a natural teacher, "is thinking it's about complicated formulas and memorization. It's actually about understanding change, how things grow, how they move, how they transform." Isabella watched in amazement as Frank took a pencil and began sketching simple diagrams that somehow made the abstract concepts concrete. His explanations were nothing like the sterile, textbook-driven sessions she had endured with her previous tutors. Frank spoke about derivatives as if they were old friends, explaining limits using everyday examples that suddenly made perfect sense. "You see," Frank continued, drawing a curve on the paper, "calculus is everywhere around us. When you're driving and you press the brake, you're using calculus, the rate at which your speed changes. When water flows from a fountain, when a bird flies through the air, when your heart beats, it's all calculus." For the first time in months, Isabella felt something click in her mind. The intimidating symbols and equations began to transform into tools for understanding the world around her. Frank's teaching style was unlike anything she'd experienced. Patient, intuitive, and surprisingly sophisticated. "How do you know all this?" Isabella asked, her curiosity overcoming her initial surprise at being tutored by a janitor. Frank's eyes held a distant look for a moment, as if accessing memories from long ago. "I've had some experience with mathematics in my time," he said modestly. "Sometimes the best teachers are the ones you least expect." As they worked through problem after problem, Isabella began to realize that Frank's knowledge went far beyond basic mathematics. His explanations revealed a deep understanding of advanced mathematical concepts that rivaled any professor she had encountered. There was clearly more to this gentle janitor than met the eye. Chapter 3. Layers of Truth. Over the next 2 hours, Frank guided Isabella through increasingly complex problems with a teaching methodology that seemed almost magical in its effectiveness. He never made her feel stupid for asking questions, never showed impatience when she needed concepts explained multiple times, and never once mentioned her family's wealth or status, things that every other adult in her life seemed obsessed with. As Isabella's confidence grew, so did her curiosity about her unexpected tutor. Frank's explanations occasionally included references to advanced mathematical principles that even her university-level tutors rarely mentioned. His handwriting, when he worked through examples, was precise and elegant, like that of someone who had spent years writing complex equations. "Mr. Martinez," Isabella said during a brief break, "were you a teacher before you worked here?" Frank paused in his writing, his pencil hovering over the paper. "In a way," he said carefully. "I taught my daughter Maria when she was your age. She had similar struggles with mathematics, but she went on to become quite successful." "What does she do now?" "She's a doctor," Frank said with unmistakable pride. "A pediatric surgeon at Children's Hospital. But she always says the best teacher she ever had was her father." Isabella sensed there was more to Frank's story, but she didn't press. Something in his demeanor suggested that his knowledge came from sources far beyond helping his daughter with homework. The way he approached problems, the sophisticated language he sometimes used before catching himself and simplifying, it all pointed to a deeper educational background. As they returned to the calculus problems, Isabella found herself working through solutions that had seemed impossible just hours before. Frank's teaching had unlocked something in her mind, showing her that mathematics wasn't her enemy, but a language she could learn to speak fluently. "You know," Frank said as Isabella successfully completed another complex derivative, "intelligence isn't about knowing everything immediately. It's about being willing to learn, to ask questions, and to persist when things get difficult. You have all of those qualities." For the first time in her academic career, Isabella felt genuinely capable, not because of her family's expectations or expensive resources, but because someone had taken the time to teach her properly. Chapter 4. The Transformation. Begins by 10 o'clock that evening. Isabella had progressed from barely understanding basic derivative to confidently working through complex chain rule problems. Frank's teaching had accomplished in 3 hours what months of expensive tutoring had failed to achieve. But more than just mathematical knowledge, something fundamental had shifted in Isabella's approach to learning. "The key," Frank explained as they worked through a particularly challenging problem involving related rates, "is not to be afraid of making mistakes. Every error teaches us something valuable about the correct path." This philosophy was revolutionary for Isabella, who had been raised in an environment where mistakes were seen as failures rather than learning opportunities. Her father's world tolerated no errors, demanded perfection from everyone, and viewed struggle as weakness. Frank's gentle acceptance of her confusion and patient guidance through difficulties felt like discovering a new way of being. As Isabella's confidence grew, she began to notice other changes in herself. She was asking more questions, thinking more creatively about problems, and approaching challenges with curiosity rather than fear. Frank's teaching style was infectious, encouraging her to become an active participant in her own learning rather than a passive recipient of information. "You're a natural problem solver," Frank observed as Isabella worked through a complex optimization problem. "You just needed someone to show you how to trust your instincts." The observation struck Isabella deeply. Throughout her life, she had been told what to think, what to achieve, and what to become. But Frank was the first adult who seemed to see and nurture her authentic intellectual potential, rather than trying to mold her into predetermined expectations. As the evening progressed, Isabella found herself sharing things with Frank that she had never told anyone. Her fears about living up to her family's legacy, her struggles with feeling inadequate despite her privileged circumstances, and her secret desire to pursue her own path, rather than the one mapped out for her by others. Frank listened with the wisdom of someone who understood that true education involved far more than academic subject. He was teaching Isabella not just calculus, but confidence, resilience, and the courage to believe in her own capabilities. Chapter 5. Hidden Depths. As midnight approached and Isabella continued to master concepts that had seemed impossible hours earlier, she became increasingly intrigued by her mysterious tutor. Frank's explanations occasionally included advanced mathematical terminology that suggested formal training far beyond what he had admitted to. His problem-solving approaches were elegant and sophisticated, bearing the hallmarks of someone with deep theoretical knowledge. "Mr. Martinez," Isabella said as they finished reviewing the fundamental theorem of calculus, "I have to ask, where did you really learn all this?" Frank was quiet for a long moment, organizing the papers they had worked through during their session. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old memories and carefully guarded secrets. "I studied mathematics at MIT many years ago," he said simply. "Earned my doctorate in 1983. Isabella's pencil slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the marble table. "You have a PhD in mathematics from MIT? Mathematical physics, actually," Frank corrected gently. "I was quite passionate about theoretical research in my younger days." The revelation recontextualized everything Isabella had observed about Frank's teaching: his sophisticated understanding, his elegant problem-solving approaches, his ability to make complex concepts accessible. It all made perfect sense now. But it also raised obvious questions about why someone with such credentials was working as a janitor. "What happened?" Isabella asked softly. "Why aren't you teaching at a university?" Frank's expression grew distant, as if he were looking back across decades of complicated choices and unexpected circumstances. "Life rarely follows the path we plan for," he said. "Sometimes we make sacrifices for the people we love, and sometimes those sacrifices become permanent." Isabella sensed there was a deeper story behind Frank's simple explanation, but she respected his privacy. What mattered was that this brilliant man had chosen to share his knowledge with her when she needed it most. The fact that he had hidden his incredible background while working humbly at the academy spoke to a character that impressed her far more than any prestigious title could have. "Does anyone here know about your education?" "You're the first student I've ever told," Frank admitted, "and I'm trusting you to keep that information private." Isabella nodded solemnly, understanding that Frank had shared something precious with her. Chapter 6. The night before. As their impromptu tutoring session stretched past midnight, Isabella experienced something she had never felt before in an academic setting: genuine joy in learning. Frank's teaching had transformed calculus from a source of anxiety into an exciting intellectual adventure. Problems that had seemed impossibly complex now felt like puzzles waiting to be solved. "One more set of problems," Frank suggested, "and I think you'll be ready for your exam." Isabella attacked the new problems with confidence that amazed her. The derivatives that had confounded her just hours earlier now seemed straightforward, and she found herself seeing mathematical patterns everywhere. Frank's patient guidance had unlocked not just understanding, but actual mathematical intuition. As they worked through the final problems, Isabella began to understand why Frank's daughter had become so successful. Anyone taught by this remarkable man would have a foundation not just in subject matter, but in critical thinking, persistence, and intellectual confidence. Frank didn't just teach mathematics. He taught students how to believe in their own minds. "I can't believe how much I've learned tonight," Isabella said, as she successfully completed a complex related rates problem. "You've done more for me in a few hours than all my previous tutors combined." "You always had this ability," Frank replied. "You just needed someone to help you discover it." The observation touched something deep in Isabella's heart. Throughout her life, expensive tutors had tried to force knowledge into her mind through repetition and pressure. Frank was the first teacher who had recognized and nurtured her natural intellectual gifts, helping her realize that she was far more capable than she had ever imagined. As they began packing up the study materials, Isabella felt a mixture of confidence about the coming exam and sadness that this magical evening was ending. Frank had given her more than mathematical knowledge. He had given her belief in herself. "Mr. Martinez," she said as they prepared to leave the library, "thank you for seeing something in me that I couldn't see in myself." Frank smiled with the satisfaction of a teacher whose student had truly. "Remember tomorrow that you are capable of far more than you know. Trust yourself." Chapter 7. The exam day. Isabella arrived at school the next morning with a calm confidence that surprised everyone who knew her. Usually, exam days found her anxious and uncertain, having crammed unsuccessfully through sleepless nights. Today, thanks to Frank's transformative teaching, she felt genuinely prepared and capable. The calculus exam that had loomed like an impossible challenge now seemed manageable. As Isabella worked through each problem, she could hear Frank's gentle voice in her mind, reminding her to approach each question with patience and confidence. The mathematical concepts that had been abstract and confusing just days before now felt like familiar tools. Her classmates, accustomed to seeing Isabella struggle with mathematics, were amazed by her calm demeanor and confident approach to the exam. Some of the students who had dismissed her as just another wealthy kid coasting on family connections began to see her in a new light. When Isabella encountered a particularly complex optimization problem, she smiled slightly, remembering Frank's teaching about approaching challenges as puzzles rather than obstacles. She worked through the problem systematically, using the methods he had shown her, and arrived at the correct solution with confidence. As she completed the final problem and reviewed her work, Isabella realized that Frank had given her something far more valuable than help with a single exam. He had taught her how to think mathematically, how to approach problems with confidence, and how to trust her own intellectual ability. When Isabella submitted her completed exam, she felt a satisfaction that went beyond mere relief. For the first time in her academic career, she knew she had performed well because she genuinely understood the material, not because of expensive tutoring or family connections. That afternoon, as Isabella walked through the halls of prestigious academy, she found herself looking for Frank. She wanted to thank him again and tell him how well the exam had, but the other maintenance staff told her that Frank had called in sick and wouldn't be back for several days. Isabella felt a pang of disappointment, but also a growing curiosity about her mysterious tutor. Something about Frank's absence felt deliberate, as if he were giving her space to process what she had learned and apply it independently. Chapter 8. The investigation. Unable to concentrate on her other classes, Isabella found herself researching Frank Martinez online during her free periods. What she discovered left her speechless and filled with even greater admiration for the man who had transformed her understanding of mathematics. Dr. Francisco Martinez had been a rising star in theoretical physics during the 1980s, with groundbreaking research in quantum field theory that had earned him international recognition. His doctoral dissertation at MIT had been cited hundreds of times, and he had been offered tenure-track positions at several prestigious universities. But the trail of his academic career ended abruptly in 1987. With no further publications or academic appointment, Isabella spent hours trying to understand what had happened to this brilliant mathematician who had ended up working as a janitor at her prep school. Additional research revealed tragic circumstances that explained Frank's career change. His wife, Carmen, had been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's disease just as his academic career was taking off. Rather than pursue prestigious positions that would have required extensive travel and research commitments, Frank had chosen to dedicate himself to caring for his wife and raising their young daughter as a single parent. Isabella discovered that Carmen had required full-time care for over 15 years before passing away. During that time, Frank had worked various jobs to support his family, eventually finding employment at prestigious academy because it offered stable hours and health benefits that could help cover his wife's medical expenses. The revelation of Frank's sacrifice moved Isabella profoundly. This brilliant man had given up international recognition and career advancement to care for his family, working humbly as a janitor while possessing knowledge that surpassed most university professors. Isabella also learned that Frank's daughter Maria had indeed become a prominent pediatric surgeon, as he had mentioned. Maria's own academic achievements had been extraordinary, and in interviews, she always credited her father as her most important teacher and inspiration. Understanding Frank's true story made Isabella even more grateful for the gift he had given her. This remarkable man had shared his knowledge not for recognition or reward, but simply because he saw a struggling student who needed help. Chapter 9. The Results. 3 days later, Isabella received her calculus exam results. She had earned a 97%, the highest mathematics score of her academic career and one of the top grades in the class. But more importantly, she had achieved this success through genuine understanding rather than memorization or luck. Her mathematics teacher, Mrs. Peterson, was so surprised by Isabella's performance that she asked to speak with her privately after class. "Isabella, your exam was remarkable," she said. "Your solutions showed a depth of understanding that I haven't seen from you before. What changed?" Isabella hesitated, unwilling to break her promise to keep Frank's background confidential. "I found a new approach to studying," she said simply. "Someone helped me understand that mathematics is about patterns and relationships, not just formula." Mrs. Peterson nodded approvingly. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. This level of understanding will serve you well in advanced mathematics courses." As word of Isabella's dramatic improvement spread, other students began asking for her help with mathematics problems. Isabella discovered that teaching others reinforced her own understanding and gave her a new appreciation for Frank's patient, encouraging approach. When Isabella's father learned about her exam results, his reaction was characteristically focused on achievement rather than learning. "Excellent work," he said during their weekly phone call. "I knew you just needed to apply yourself properly. This proves you have Whitmore capabilities." But Isabella barely heard his praise. Her thoughts were focused on finding Frank and thanking him properly for the transformation he had made possible. She had been looking for him throughout the school, but hadn't seen him since their night in the library. Finally, Isabella worked up the courage to ask the head custodian about Frank's whereabouts. "Oh, Frank's been helping out at his daughter's hospital," the man explained. "Some kind of family emergency. Should be back next week." Isabella felt a mixture of concern and anticipation. She hoped Frank's family was okay, but she also couldn't wait to share her success with the teacher who had made it possible. Chapter 10. The Reunion. A week later, Isabella spotted Frank replacing light bulbs in the main hallway. She approached him with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, carrying her graded exam as proof of what his teaching had accomplished. "Mr. Martinez!" she called out, her voice echoing in the marble corridor. Frank turned, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile when he saw her. "Isabella, how did your exam go?" 97%, she said, holding up the paper with obvious pride. "The highest mathematics grade I've ever received." Frank's smile widened, and Isabella could see genuine joy in his eyes. "I knew you could do it," he said simply. "You just needed to trust yourself." "It wasn't just trusting myself," Isabella insisted. "It was having someone believe in me and teach me properly. You changed everything." Frank set down his tools and looked at Isabella with the same patient attention he had given her during their tutoring session. "The knowledge was always inside you," he said. "I just helped you organize it and access it." Isabella wanted to tell Frank that she had researched his background, that she knew about his impressive credentials and personal sacrifice, but something in his demeanor suggested that he preferred to keep those aspects of his life private. Instead, she focused on the future. "Mr. Martinez, would you be willing to tutor me again? I have other mathematics courses coming up, and I learned so much better with your teaching methods." Frank considered her request carefully. "I would be honored to help you," he said, "but I have one condition. You must promise to help other students who are struggling. Knowledge is meant to be shared." Isabella agreed immediately, understanding that Frank was teaching her a lesson about responsibility and generosity that went far beyond mathematics. "Also," Frank added with a slight twinkle in his eye, "I think it's time you started calling me Dr. Martinez, at least during our tutoring." Isabella smiled, grateful that Frank was beginning to trust her with more of his true identity. Chapter 11. The Ripple Effect. Over the following months, Isabella's transformation from struggling student to confident mathematician created ripples throughout prestigious academy. Her success challenged the assumptions of classmates and teachers who had written her off as another wealthy student lacking intellectual substance. With Frank's continued tutoring, Isabella not only maintained her mathematical improvement, but began excelling in physics and chemistry as well. Frank's teaching method, emphasizing understanding over memorization, patience over pressure, and curiosity over compliance, proved effective across multiple subjects. True to her promise, Isabella began helping other students who struggled with mathematics. She discovered that teaching others reinforced her own learning while giving her a sense of purpose that her previous achievements had never provided. Her tutoring sessions, conducted in the same library where Frank had first helped her, became popular among students who had given up on understanding mathematics. Isabella's approach mirrored Frank's methodology, creating safe spaces for questions, celebrating mistakes as learning opportunities, and helping students discover their own problem-solving capability. The student who had once felt intellectually inadequate was now empowering others to overcome their academic challenges. Her father, Richard Whitmore, noticed the change in his daughter during one of his rare visits to the school. "Isabella seems different," he observed to the headmaster. "More confident, more engaged with her studies." The headmaster, unaware of Frank's role in Isabella's transformation, attributed her improvement to maturity and better study habits. But Isabella's teachers recognized that something more fundamental had changed in her approach to learning. Mrs. Peterson, Isabella's mathematics teacher, was particularly impressed by her students' development. "Isabella has become one of our strongest mathematics students," she told colleagues. "But more than that, she's become a teacher herself. The way she helps other students shows a deep understanding of both the subject matter and the learning process." Isabella took pride in these observations, but she knew that all her improvement traced back to one extraordinary evening with a janitor who happened to be a brilliant mathematician, willing to share his knowledge with a struggling student. Chapter 12. The Greater Truth. As Isabella's senior year progressed, her relationship with Frank deepened beyond tutoring into something approaching mentorship. Their weekly sessions in the library became opportunities for Frank to share not just mathematical knowledge, but life wisdom accumulated through decades of experience. During one session, as they worked through advanced calculus problems that would prepare Isabella for college-level mathematics, Frank finally shared more details about his personal journey. "I want you to understand," he said, "that success isn't always measured by external recognition or prestigious positions." He told Isabella about the difficult decision to leave academic research to care for his wife, about the financial struggles that followed, and about the satisfaction he had found in raising Maria to become a compassionate and skilled doctor. His story was one of sacrifice, love, and finding meaning in service rather than personal ambition. "But don't you regret giving up your research career?" Isabella asked. "You could have made important discoveries, earned international recognition." Frank smiled with the contentment of someone who had made peace with his choices. "I did make important discovery," he said. "I discovered that being a good father and husband was more fulfilling than any academic achievement. I discovered that knowledge is most valuable when it's shared with others who need it. And I discovered that meaningful work isn't always the work that gets recognized." These conversations profoundly influenced Isabella's thinking about her own. Her father expected her to pursue business or finance, preparing to eventually take over aspects of the family empire. But Frank's example showed her that there were other ways to define success and contribution. As Isabella's college applications approached, she found herself drawn to education and mathematics rather than business. Frank's influence had awakened a passion for learning and teaching that she never knew existed. "Whatever path you choose," Frank advised during one of their final tutoring sessions, "make sure it allows you to use your gifts in service of something larger than yourself. That's where you'll find true satisfaction." Isabella knew that Frank's wisdom would guide her decisions long after she left prestigious academy. Chapter 13. The Legacy Lives. On graduation day at prestigious academy was typically a celebration of wealth and privilege, with successful parents congratulating themselves on their children's achievements. But for Isabella, the day held deeper significance as she reflected on the transformation that had begun with a chance encounter in the library. As the valedictorian, a position she had earned through genuine academic excellence rather than family connection, Isabella faced a choice about her graduation speech. She could deliver the expected platitudes about achievement and success, or she could honor the person who had truly changed her life. Standing at the podium before an audience of wealthy families and distinguished faculty, Isabella began her speech with words that surprised everyone. "The most important teacher I've encountered at this academy is someone most of you have never noticed. Someone whose wisdom and knowledge far exceed his official title." Without mentioning Frank by name or revealing his credentials, Isabella spoke about the importance of recognizing wisdom wherever it appears, about learning from unexpected sources, and about the responsibility that comes with privilege and education. Her speech challenged the audience to look beyond titles and appearances to discover the valuable knowledge and experience that surrounded them in unexpected forms. She spoke about the janitor who had taught her more than any expensive tutor, about the importance of patience and kindness in education, and about the obligation to share knowledge with others who need it. After the ceremony, Frank approached Isabella with tears in his eyes. "That was a beautiful speech," he said. "You've learned the most important lesson of all, that teaching and learning are about human connection, not just transferring information." Isabella hugged her mentor, knowing that their relationship would continue even as she moved on to college. Frank had given her more than mathematical knowledge. He had taught her how to see the world with curiosity, compassion, and intellectual humility. As Isabella prepared to leave prestigious academy for Harvard, where she would major in education and mathematics, she carried with her the lessons Frank had taught, that true intelligence involves questioning assumptions, that the best teachers often come from unexpected places, and that knowledge is most valuable when it's shared generously with others. Years later, as Dr. Isabella Martinez Whitmore, she had taken Frank's surname as a tribute to her mentor. She would become a renowned educator herself, known for her innovative teaching methods and her commitment to helping struggling students discover their potential. Her classrooms would always be places where questions were welcome, mistakes were celebrated as learning opportunity, and every student was treated with the same patient respect that Frank had shown her. The ripple effects of one extraordinary evening in a prep school library would continue for generations, as Isabella's students went on to become teachers themselves, carrying forward Frank's revolutionary approach to education and human potential. Thank you for joining us on this inspiring journey of unexpected mentorship and transformative ed. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Please let us know where in the world you're listening to our story, and share your own experiences with teachers who made a difference in your life. Your stories of inspiration and learning help build a global community of people who believe in the power of education to change lives.